That'd be perfect.
Okay. Oh, there's Flaxen. Hello, everybody. My name is Evelyn. I'm known by Miss Evelyn because people chose to put that in front of my name, and that's okay with me. I am one of the organizers for and founder of this group, the Anti-Racist Conversations, and we are delighted that you are here today with us. I would like to start by making sure you guys feel welcome and giving you a few guidelines of how we operate and how the procedure for the event today. So we ask that you introduce yourselves in the chat, your name and location only, please, and remain on mute. Time will be allotted for questions and answers. And what we're going to do today, because we do have a keynote speaker, we're going to give complete respect to our keynote speaker and follow these procedures that I'm going to share with you now, please. This event is not for promotional information from any of our attendees. So with that said, for the event, we ask that you not post any negative information in the chat. These are a lot of do nots, but I must say them. Do not post any links that are personal to you in the chat or otherwise. Do not post any information about the former president in the chat. The event is not about that. And do not post any information that you are trying to engage in for us to engage in. Our event is already has an agenda today, so we're going to stick with the agenda that we have. If you would like to communicate with us about an event that you'd like to host, you're welcome to send us an email, and you have our email address. So we really appreciate your understanding of all those do nots. But we want to give respect to the speaker today. Now, he has a lot to share with us. And we want to make sure we're attentive to hearing that information. And a little bit now about our organizational history for those of you guys who are new with us today. Our Anti-Racist Conversations group was organized virtually on June 19th, 2020, after the atrocious murder of George Floyd on May 25th, 2020. Our core values are celebrate. We always have something to celebrate as people, no matter what it is. Educate each other on the facts. We are focused on the facts. We all have opinions, but for these events that we host, they're all about the facts. And then we try to cultivate friendships across the nation to build a movement, one event at a time, to bring us together, because we all have these collective stories that are more alike than they are different. And for us anti-racism requires an understanding of how years of federal, state, and local policies have placed communities of color specifically at risk and in crisis. And it's a call to action that demands that we decry such policies as racist. We also believe anti-racism is about recognizing one's own position in a racist society and locate the roots of problems in power and policies that privilege one group of people over another. So we're all about that. So thank you for listening to those two aspects of our meeting. And at this time, I would like to introduce to you Suzanne Parker. Suzanne has been a member of the art community for a long time, and she's one of the 4 event planners that we have for special events like this. And she will guide the meeting shortly. But joining her today is going to be Flaxen Conway as a panelist and Lena Jackson as a panelist. And they have questions that they will pose to Representative Jackson after his presentation. So many thanks to each of you for your participation in this very, very important event. Suzanne Parker. You're muted, Suzanne.
I'm sorry. Um, Derrick Jackson represents Georgia's 68th District. He is a retired military officer veteran, U.S. Navy, corporate general manager, adjunct professor, nonprofit board member, and a leader in his community. Honorable Derrick Jackson is known for his integrity, honesty, and enthusiasm, compassion, and solid commitment to serving his constituents. He continues to be recognized for his inspiring community leadership and has received several awards, including Fayette County Citizen of the Year in 2013 by Theta Lambda chapter of Omega Psi Phi fraternity, as well as the recipient of the 2019 Civil Servant of the Year Rice Award. Additionally, he was awarded the 2019 Georgia House Democratic Caucus Chairman's Award for his leadership and recognized as one of Atlanta's Business Journal's 2019 Top 25 Extraordinary Atlantans. Additionally, this public servant and doctoral candidate has no idle time, as Honorable Derrick Jackson is currently enrolled in Walden University's PhD program for public policy. He was inducted into the Golden Key International Honor Society and Pi Alpha Honor Society for Public Affairs and Administration. He is married to the Honorable Camilla Jackson, former state representative of House District 153. Their family consists of 7 amazing young adults and 1 grandson. Lastly, Derrick is a lifelong member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, a Silver Life member of NAACP, a proud member of Elizabeth Baptist Church, and serves on several nonprofit organization boards. Introducing to you the Honorable Representative Derrick Jackson, State Representative.
Hello, 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 everyone. It's so great to be with ARC family and friends. Thank you, Suzanne, so much for that warm introduction. Great seeing you again. It's been a number of years. And thank you, Miss Evelyn, for finding in your heart this awesome organization. When I went online just to read up about ARC, we need ARC in all 50 states. All 50 states, ARC need to have a chapter in all 50 states. And it's so great to be with you all. Listen, I out of that whole bio, the 2 titles I enjoy the most is being a husband and a father. All the work that I do, Miss Evelyn and Lena and Casey and Conway, and I see others, Weaver. The thing I enjoy the most is being a husband and sharing this thing called life with someone else, right? A significant other, to be able to say that I was blessed to find someone to travel this journey, and in this beautiful union, we have just amazing children. I know every parent is going to say that about their children, but listen, I say this boldly, that our 7 children, 4 girls and 3 boys, and we have 1 grandson, by the way. And man, I just enjoy being a father. I see what I do now and how I pour values and principles into them. And I thank God allowing me the opportunity to see these values and principles to manifest into these young adults. And one day they too will be husband and wives and just productive citizens in our society. As a retired naval officer, I did 22 years in the United States Navy. And what I learned during those 22 years, Flaxen, I learned that leadership is everything. Leadership takes courage, it takes honesty, it takes integrity. But then when I did those 22 years in the Navy, and I looked at my wife, I said, I got to do something else, right? These 7 deployments and 4 combat missions and 2 special operations, I missed so much with seeing the upbringing of my children, right? I'm doing the work of our country and fighting for this democracy that I believe in, this shared responsibility and preserving the Constitution. But after 22 years, I said, I need to do something else. I need to be around. And so I went into corporate America. And I got to tell you, Mackenzie, one of the things I learned while I was in corporate America, it's not like the Navy. Because in the Navy, we focus on people. In corporate America, they focus on profit. Right? And so I was like a little unsettled during my 10 years in corporate America. And then life struck where when your wife gets breast cancer, and then you try to figure this thing out. And so then I started seeing how our healthcare system and how women's health right here in Georgia was different for women than it is for me as a man. And so then I decided, make a long story short, I decided to go into politics, and I got elected in 2016. And I ran for office knowing that I had the skill sets, the capability, and the capacity to do so. And I solely ran on three things. I ran on women's health because it was important to me as a father with four girls and three boys. I ran on education because I think that is, when you have young children going through the education process and seeing how teachers were giving their all, even the little bit that were given to them, but yet their government wasn't meeting them halfway. Government wasn't equipping our teachers with all the necessary resources and tools to enable our children to be the absolute best, whatever God called them in this world to do. So I ran on education. And then third, I ran on democracy. I'm a retired naval officer. Why wouldn't I? Right? I see all these forces coming after our democracy, and I realize that we have to leave something for the future generation, as if the past generation did for us, right? Is it perfect? No. No, our democracy is not perfect. It's flawed, just like we are as human beings. But that's all we have. That's all we have, Ms. Evelyn, is a democracy that says that you too should be able to love who you love, live how you so choose, and then make sure that you got the guardrails in place, right, to keep our society civil. So if we need to say we need to enforce gun laws over here to keep our population safe, then we need to enforce gun laws, right? I know what guns can do to the human body, right? The Navy trained me for 22 years, but them same semi-automatic guns do not belong in our public space. I mean, when you think about since 1999, the first time we really started to pay attention to mass shooting was Columbine. And we're all young enough to remember what happened in 1999. We thought for sure that we were going to put some common sense things in place to keep our children, our teachers, and everyone else safe. But since 1999, ladies and gentlemen, I discovered over 400,000 students these last 25 years have encountered gun violence. There's no reason why we have metal detectors at the entrance and exits of our schools. It creates a psychology with our children in a different place where they should be able to go to school and feel safe. That environment should be conducive for learning, right? So they too can become productive citizens in our society. But it's hard to do that when you got to walk through metal detectors. It's hard to do that when the federal and state governments tend to think that prayers and thoughts and is enough. I thought for sure when Sandy Hook happened, right? 21 precious little babies. We're talking about pre-K and kindergarten, first grades, right? When you see a president by the name of Barack Obama at the time shed a tear, what does that say about our humanity? What does that say about our compassion when Sandy Hook happened? And then right after that, Parker happened. Our children just simply asking for us to do our part in federal and state government to say, keep me safe. All they want to do is just play with their friends and learn as much as they can. And That's all they're asking, right? And so I just want to come and say three things, and then I'll love to open up for questions. The three things I want to talk to you all about that's near and dear to me, and I'm sure based on the polls and statistics is near and dear to ARC. The first thing I want to talk to you all is about women's rights. We see that there is a clear assault on women's rights. It makes absolutely no sense that men write laws that legislate your bodies and not one law legislate mine. I just simply want my four daughters to have 100% autonomy over their bodies like my three sons. Period. Now, I know we tend to wrap reproductive freedom and women's rights all around healthcare, right? And that makes sense, but not in a sense where we have to legislate your body and dictate to you how you should deal with your body, right? So I'm saying, even outside of reproductive freedom, let's just simply say that every human being, man and woman, have 100% control over their body. Period. End of story. So when you start to talk about mammograms and IVF and abortion and all these things, it sort of murky up the conversation. And the reason why I think it murkies up the conversation because there are men who are writing these laws. They're not women who are writing these laws. And so I truly want to continue, as Suzanne would tell you, she's heard me before in Georgia, to be a champion for women's rights, period. I think women should get equal pay, right? We have a law that's been around for 60 years. 60 years. I'm only 58. This law has been around 2 years longer than I have, talking about equal pay. And so if my four daughters, we invest in them, they go off to college. If they have a male counterpart that also has a 4-year degree, why is my daughter getting 60 cents to a dollar compared to her male counterpart? That makes no sense to me. Economically, right, wrong, it does not make any sense. And so I would love to talk to you all how important it is to protect our queens, our women in our society. Even God knew we would need more women in this world than men, right? Even God knew that women vote more than men. So it should not be that a man dictates the control of a woman's body. I think women should have the right to vote. I think women should have the right to live. And I think the women need to have the right to be heard. Period. That's number one. Women's rights. Women's rights. Women's rights. The second thing I would love to talk to you all about are voter rights. Voter rights should be available to us all. It doesn't matter if you're white, black, Republican, Democrat, independent, young or old. If you are eligible to vote and you are an American citizen, you should be able to exercise your civic duty. But what ended up happening, at least what we've witnessed, after the Supreme Court removed a provision in Section 5 back in 2013, in June, the United States Supreme Court had no business gutting the Voter Rights Act. And as soon as they did that, ladies and gentlemen, in 2013, 48 out of 50 states immediately started to play around voting rights, what you can and cannot do, making it very subjective. I mean, it's just horrible. Here in Georgia, this Republican governor and Republican legislature, they introduced Senate Bill 202. And just to give you just a high, based on time, let me just give you a Cliff Note version. Senate Bill 202 is 98 pages long. And it's got some very egregious things in there that was passed in 2021. And the reason why they passed it because Republicans lost in 2020, right? and they decided to change the rules. I mean, we cannot even give out water. So if you have someone standing in a long line for an hour or 2 or 3 hours, they prohibit us giving out water. I mean, let's say you have a 78-year-old, or in my case, I'm taking care of my 87-year-old aunt, and she wants to cast her ballot. She's standing there in line, and no one can give her water if she's standing in line, right? Now, there's some more egregious things in this 98-page document, but I just want to give you just that one example, Miss Evelyn, how atrocious this bill is. And then because we won again here in Georgia, despite all the hurdles and barriers that they put before us, then they came up with Senate Bill 189 to even make it more challenging. They passed in 2020-24, they passed another bill to make it even harder to vote. Why? But we will, as often women do, women lead by example. In fact, the last presidential election, 68 million women voted. Can y'all imagine how many women gonna vote this time? Because women they're women just, if y'all don't, listen, I know, I get it, but folks need to talk about all these polls and everything, but they're gonna soon realize when women say they had enough, right? The 19th Amendment, they're going after the 19th Amendment, Miss Evelyn. You have individuals right now who are running for office, the highest office in the land, saying the 19th Amendment should be repealed. 19th Amendment? Why the 19th Amendment? Because that's when women had the right in this country to vote, right? The third thing I would love to talk to you all about, my third and final thing, is democracy. Listen, democracy is very fragile. This country has been around for a long time, Miss Evelyn, and we have our ups and our downs, but in the end, we still progressively move forward, right? We're better off today than we were 100 years ago, right? But there are forces who are trying to take us back. And where we thought some laws that were safe, Casey, those laws are no longer safe. We watched when they overturned Roe v. Wade. Another state went back to 1864. Why 1864? Because women did not have a say in our democracy in 1864. That state went back. And so the dirty little secret, in all 50 states, we still have some laws on the books that are 100, 150, 200 years old. And so if you remove a current law, Flaxen, guess what happens? You remove this current law, as we did with Roe v. Wade, that was around for 51 years, that triggers another law that's still on the books 160 years ago. And so we have to be careful. If we want to protect and preserve this democracy, it requires for us all. Dr. King said, this beloved community, we all have a responsibility to protect and preserve it. And so we all individually and collectively, Miss Lena Jackson, we all have a role and responsibility to protect it. And so with that, Miss Evelyn, I open up for any questions that I've either presented around women's rights, around voter rights and democracy and guns, or any other questions that you and the panel may have for me. And again, thank you for the work that you all are doing in ARC. We really do need an ARC in every state in the United States. Thank you so much.
Suzanne. It's you, Suzanne.
I'm
I
sorry.
didn't mean to preach. You know, I know it's Sunday. I didn't mean to preach. But it's just in my heart when I think about my four daughters and my three sons, what kind of democracy I want to turn over to them. Because one day, Suzanne, they're going to look back at 2024. They're not going to ask what did Dr. King or Coretta Scott King, what did they do? They've been long gone. They're going to ask, Dad, what did you do in 2024? What did you do individually? And then what did you all did collectively to give us a democracy?
Yes. Thank you so much, Representative Jackson. I agree with everything you're saying. You're very inspirational, and the mantle has indeed been passed on to us. I'm trailing right behind you in the years, just right there behind you, just 2 years behind you. So, and I'm too moved to save a democracy that my ancestors built for free. As my mother, my late mother said, she said, Suzanne, this is the only country we have, so we've got to take care of it. And I never thought that we would be on the brink of losing this country. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our panelists again who have questions to ask and knowledge to share, that you have knowledge to share. Introducing Lena Jackson and Flaxen Conway, who will be asking you questions. And we are interested to hear how you could further educate us. So I will turn over the first question to Miss Lena Jackson.
Good afternoon. Again, thank you, Representative Jackson, for your time and your service. My first question is, how has accessible voting for the brown and Black communities with disabilities changed in the past couple of years? Me, myself being part of the community, I'm always interested what's in place to help and further have our voice heard.
Yes, Ms. Lena, that's a great question. And I think, it changed, unfortunately, in the worst case, these most recent years, right? We removed provisions, again, to make sure that everyone have the right to be heard. And so we made it harder with by reducing drop boxes. They changed absentee ballots. I mean, when you think about those men and women who serve our country overseas, when you think about college students, when you think about the disabled, right? They may not be able to physically go and cast their ballot. And so there are other methodologies and mechanisms that we have in place for them to cast their vote. But when you pass current laws to make it just that much more difficult, when you pass laws to especially really demonstrate in Black and brown communities that we're going to disenfranchise your vote simply because of the pigmentation of your skin, right? When we make it harder, when we do not have those who have English as a second language, that becomes a disability, right? If you can't read what's on the ballot, you now just impaired that individual. And so we should have the resources readily available for every citizen. I don't care if they speak Spanish, Mandarin, if a person was born without any arms, they should be able to have the resources available to cast their ballot. That's the responsibility of the federal and state government, is to make sure that all citizens who are eligible to vote, Ms. Lena, should have that right to vote. And they should have those resources available. And so if a person is blind or they cannot hear, whatever that disability is, the federal and state governments should make sure that those resources are available so their ballot can be cast just like any other citizen.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, really, really good question. I love the sign behind your head, Lena, that says, "We're not going back." because that's, I think, one of the scariest things right now is how much it feels the tide kind of trying to pull you back, and we have to fight against that. Representative Jackson, I just loved so much your presentation. Thank you so much. I would be so honored to have you represent me in my state government. I wish we could put you through the Xerox machine and have you out here in Oregon as well as in Georgia. So my first question really is, I think in this election, more than any election, I'm starting to look at my responsibility as an Oregonian to help support other states. And because of the last Anti-Racist Conversations event, Vote Forward, I found myself writing letters this week to citizens in Michigan. I want to write letters to everywhere, but I also want to know, like, what else can people do in other states to help Georgia? I guess with the challenges that you mentioned, sir, are very much the challenges in a lot of places. But I feel like we can't just be in our own little bubble and go, what can I do for Oregon?
Yeah, Flaxen, that's a great question, and I will answer it this way, in the most honest way. We have to mobilize and organize in every city, every state, because you're right. It's not just in Georgia. It's not just in Michigan. I know we typically, every election cycle, Flaxen, we refer to it as battleground states. But you too, right there in Oregon, right, are dealing with some changes in state laws that they do not want you, Flaxen, to vote in Oregon, right? You just, I mean, I've had the pleasure of visiting Oregon when I was with GE, and I was just amazed how they had no women in the top echelon of their corporation. I'm like, there are some smart women out there, right? And so I just think when I say we have to organize and mobilize, and that there should be an ARC in every state, I think this is the vehicle, right? Let's not reinvent the wheel. The reason why the NAACP has been around for over 100 and what, almost 115, 116 years, because there were some honest Americans, whites, blacks, men and women got together. 60 of them said, we got to stop this killing and lynching of black men and women in Louisiana. But it wasn't just happening in Louisiana, because they realized it was happening in Mississippi and Georgia and Alabama. And so they just formed the NAACP, and then the NAACP went across all the United States, and every chapter, they just learned how to mobilize and organize, because what you discover by doing that you will always have a constant means of communication. It's not just during the election, right? And so the best way, I think, in my humble opinion, is right there in Oregon. You all start setting up an ARC chapter and figure out what that looks like. So that way, your members in Oregon will show up at school boards and make sure that we're not banning books. You got to make sure that your voice is heard. And again, because there are forces out there, Flaxen, that they always want to make this men against women or blacks versus white, and say, no, we are anti-racist, and we're going to make sure that this democracy will have access for everyone in every state, in every city, in every community, because that's what our ancestors did for us. And now we have the baton is in our hand. And so I just say you got to mobilize and organize, and with the technology that we have today, it could be more than just letter writing. It could be more than just sending $5, $10 to a candidate in Georgia or Michigan or Wisconsin. It's to say we're going to build a network to where we're always going to be in place. And so if there's a woman or a man that we believe possess our values and principles, and they're running for governor, then we can figure out how to help them because we're always in constant communication. And so when we learn how to organize and mobilize through the use of technology today and through the use of sending money and through the use of protest, there are forces that do not want us to protest no more, right? I mean, so it's just amazing what's at stake. And that's the reason why I mentioned democracy. And let's mobilize and organize across the United States, not just during the election cycle.
Thank you again, Representative Jackson. My second question is more of a personal question, but I'm going to ask it. Have you or anybody in your immediate circle or family had their voting eligibility challenged or been purged from any kind of election list? And if that did happen, how was the process handled?
Great question. And interesting enough, 2 weeks ago, my baby sister called me up. She lives 20 minutes, 20, 30 minutes from me in another county, but here in Georgia. And she said, Derrick, they just put my voting status inactive. I said, you've been voting as long as I can remember. What happened? And so she sent me the correspondence that the Secretary of State provided her. I made a phone call, and because I'm a state representative, they resolved that like yesterday. But not everyone, Miss Lena, going to have a relative that's in the legislature. And so I don't know how individuals without having that kind of relationship will be able to resolve it, which is the reason why I tell Georgians to check your voting status early and then give me a call. So you don't have to be related to me. You don't have to be my constituent. You can live in a different jurisdiction. If you live in Georgia and they attended my Zoom and watched my Facebook post, and they could be living in Savannah, Georgia, which is 3 hours away from me, and they went to mvp.sos.ga.gov, and they discovered that their status is inactive, they called me, and I'm gonna get that rectified immediately. Because again, October 7th is our voter registration deadline day. And if you're not registered to vote by October 7th, you cannot participate. And that's the same for every state in the United States. You got to know what your deadline date is for voter registration, and you got to find a champion that's in your General Assembly, in that legislature, that's going to help you resolve it. I think that's the best way, Ms. Lena, to mitigate these kind of situations. We don't have time to write a letter or send an email and it gets lost in the black hole somewhere. We got to make phone calls right now to make sure that everyone that's eligible to vote, that they're eligible to vote. And if you live in the state of Georgia or those who want to see this afterwards, we got to make sure that they got a champion. They can call me and I'm going to get it rectified immediately.
Fabulous question, Lena. Again, sir, I think you'd be fabulous to be. I would love to be able to call you my representative. I think that's. What are your fellow representatives? They don't all think like you. When you talk with them, and you say these kind of things, how do you keep that relationship going, even though they're viewing something that's so important to you and to us from such a different lens? How do you deal with that?
Yeah. I think I'm about to go in my 5th term, and I think that is the hardest thing right there. I think that's the hardest thing for me, is having a conversation with my colleagues or those on the other side of the aisle and say, deep down in your heart, you have to feel convicted too. You have to have compassion too. And I asked them, where is your level of humanity, right? Your spirit of wholeness, right? I don't, because see, listen, government can create a mess, and it's going to take government to get us out of this mess. But if none of my colleagues is flaxing, if they don't exercise what I call political courage, we're in trouble. We're in trouble. We're in trouble. Uh, that's what makes me different than a lot of folks, because when I lost my mother in 2013 to cancer, it was just, me being her only son. She gave me three baby sisters, but it was the way she raised me was, Derrick, always think about everyone else in your community first. And I grew up. I think I was about 7 or 8 years old when she taught me this lesson. And if you know anything about Syracuse, New York, where the snow gets 5 or 6 feet tall, and there was a retired school teacher that was living in our neighborhood, and he was up in age. And like I said, I was about 7 or 8, and I would shovel our driveway because my mother was a nurse, so she can, get the vehicle in and out. Um, and so one time she told me to go across the street because Mr. Smith could not shovel his driveway. And I said, yes, ma'am. I went over and shoveled the driveway. And Mrs. Smith, his wife, upon completion, she said, Derrick, we thank you so much. How much do we pay you? I said, ma'am, I can't take your money. My mama said, my mama told me to come over and shovel your driveway. So she said, don't go nowhere. She went in and got me a hot cup of hot chocolate. Man, she didn't have to ask me no more to shovel that driveway. Man, I shoveled that driveway every time the snow fell. I thought that was this kindest gesture, that my mother told me to go shovel our neighbor's driveway. And my neighbor took it upon herself to give me a cup of hot chocolate. And I took my little shovel and the styrofoam hot chocolate and went back home. And that taught me, and again, like I said, I was just 7 or 8. I was just 7 or 8 years old, but I learned what community was like. I learned, Flaxen, what it means to be courageous. And let me tell you, it wasn't that many of us that was living in this neighborhood. And so I grew up in New York not seeing racial lines, colorblind, if you will. I just saw it being a good gesture and being neighborly. And so when I graduated from high school and went on, and my mother asked, what did I want to do? I said, I wanted to go into the military. And then the military taught me how to be courageous, how to understand what honor and integrity and commitment, what that meant. And so it's got to be political courage. Flaxen, it's got to be, I tell you, Liz Cheney is demonstrating political courage. All right. And I just use her as an example of who I see exercising political courage right now. Right? It's not, this thing goes beyond party. It goes beyond the pigmentation of one's skin. It's the greater whole of our being, right? And again, I know it's Sunday, I don't want to preach, but our pastor is saying, can you imagine, Miss Evelyn, he said, can you imagine living in heaven on earth? And I'm like, living in heaven on earth. And what that means to me is we won't see male and female. We won't see black or white. We won't see old and young. We're going to be in this spirit form. So if whatever that emotion is, if I need to exercise my political courage to feel like I'm living in heaven on earth and me being married to my wife, I feel like I'm in heaven already.
Excellent. That's a great, great response, Representative Jackson. For my final question, I'm gonna be nosy. What future bills are you going to be supporting or leading to help protect women before, during, and after pregnancy? I've been doing my research, so I know Georgia has a sort of high maternal mortality rate. So I just want to know, is there anything cooking? What's going to be happening soon? Just fill us in.
Yeah. So Miss Lena, so now you're. It's not so much being nosy, but in the Navy, I learned how to operate in covert. Right? You can't tell the enemy what you're doing because then they're going to block and tackle. Right? But I would say it in this manner, in all candor and honesty. Today, I find myself doing more defending, playing more on defense than offense, unfortunately. In Georgia, we have 19, 19, 19 pieces of legislation that dictates a woman's body. 19. And there are 0 that dictates a man's body. We have 82 counties, 82 out of 159 counties without an OBGYN. 82. We have 61 counties out of 159 without a pediatrician. So, Miss Lena, the reason why we have a high level of maternal and infant mortality is because Georgia keeps talking about we're the #1 state to do business, but we're not the #1 state for family, and we dang sure ain't the #1 state for women. In fact, we rank number 48 out of 50 states for women's health. And so I find myself being more on block and tackling and defending and trying to stop these bad bills. Georgia is sitting on $16 billion surplus. Surplus. There's no reason why every county do not have an OBGYN. There's no reason why we don't have pediatricians. There's no reason why we cannot keep we should have kept the 12 hospitals open. All we have to do is adopt the Affordable Care Act here in Georgia and expand Medicaid. We have money that's sitting on the table. The federal government is waiting to give us our fair share of $7 billion. $7 billion. $7 billion. So we got $16 billion in surplus, $7 billion waiting there. So that's $23 billion that we can demonstrate to women, right? 2 years ago, 169 women lost their lives just simply trying to give birth. 169 women should still be here. 2 more women we added to that list. You all heard recently Amber Nicole Thurman and Candy Miller. Can you imagine as a parent, you see your daughter's death certificate stamp preventable death? Think about that for a second. Let that resonate. We don't typically stamp on one's death certificate preventable death. Preventable. We typically stamp on there, cancer, heart attack, stroke, right? Not the word preventable. There's 169 women who should still be here. We should still be able to call them mother and wife and sister and aunt. There's 776 children who simply should be here. Why 776 infants lost their life? Right? And so, yes, Miss Lena, we do have a problem in Georgia, but it doesn't just rest in Georgia. Our mortality around maternal mortality and infant mortality is just appalling. It's pathetic. When you have the resources that Georgia possess, right? We're talking about billions of dollars. These things are preventable. And so I'm going to be in the business of stopping bad bills. I'm going to introduce good bills around women's health. I'm going to introduce bills around gun control. I'm going to introduce bills to protect and preserve our democracy. And I'm going to sponsor bills more around voter rights. And I will continue to champion this because going back to Flaxen's question, I'm going to exercise political courage. Someone has to do it. And we tend to think that it takes a lot of us, but it only takes one, right? Dr. King changed this world, and he was just one person. Coretta Scott King changed this world too, right? Because a lot of people keep forgetting that Dr. King was assassinated, and when he died, he was 38. After he died, Coretta Scott King continued on the fight until she passed away. And so I always like to mention those two because they demonstrate political courage. And neither one of them were elected, Flaxen. They never held a political office, but they still demonstrate what political courage is. And again, Liz Cheney is an example of that right now.
Okay, so Suzanne, I think we'll go now to others. Maybe Casey has a question or two.
Hi there.
Hey, Casey.
Hey, thank you so much for doing this. It's been really great. Georgia has a special place in my heart in terms of the democracy fight because Miss Evelyn and I did a lot of work leading up to 2020 and working the phones and then on the two Senate runoffs. And so I got her friendship out of that and just got to love so many thousands of people in Georgia that I talked to. And just in terms of what you were talking about voting, I live in Colorado and we have such a great system. I mean, we're all mail-in. If you want, you can go to the polls, but otherwise you just automatically, and voter registration's up till the day of the election. Everyone gets a ballot. There's drop boxes everywhere. And I just, it's all disingenuous, obviously, why that's a bad thing. But it's just, I wish it was like that everywhere. But my question kind of went back to one Lena asked. Kind of read about this new Georgia law about anyone can go onto a website and kick someone else off the rolls. How worried are you about that? And I know tomorrow's the last day to register to vote there. All of the stuff they're trying to do, how you think we're going to be able to overcome and get everyone to vote who wants to?
No, Casey, listen, that's what keeps me up, Casey. That's what keeps me motivated. And I share it with some on Facebook Live how I'm one of Kamala Harris' surrogates here in Georgia. And in the last 30 days, I done put 2,000 miles on my car. We got a fight on our hands here in Georgia. We had three press conferences urging Governor Kemp, the current governor here in Georgia, to exercise his executive authority to remove these three individuals on the state election board. Mm-hmm. We've always, Casey, observed the 90-day rule, which simply means 90 days before the election, Casey, you do not make any changes.
Right.
But we're training poll workers and managers, and we got 159 counties in Georgia. We're getting the machines ready. We doing all the tabulation. with resources, power cords, all these things, Casey. That's what we should be doing in the 90-day, what we call quiet period. In this 90-day quiet period, you're not making any changes, but you got a state election board that these 3 individuals were appointed in August. And it has been documented, well known by an individual that's running for the highest office in the land. He mentioned these 3 individuals by name. And it's so concerning, Casey, that they're implementing all these rules. And we only have, 30 days now? I think it's, what day is this? 30 days. And they have more rules they want to implement. 30 days. And so it's going to create all this conflict and confusion, Casey. It's going to create a level of hysteria. And it's going to plant seeds in folks' minds. Well, will my vote count? Will somebody overturn it? Will somebody not certify it? And unfortunately, when the Attorney General and Secretary of State agreed with us, said these things that the State Election Board is wrong and it's illegal. And they too, and they're Republicans now. I don't want to make this too political, but they too are Republicans. They're trying to exercise political courage, Flaxen. And the governor said, nope, he's not going to do it. He's going to let them keep on doing what they're doing. He ain't going to remove them. So yes, Casey, I am very concerned come November 5th. You all in Colorado and everywhere else, Georgia's going to be a spectacle. And we're going to, and we're not going to be in the limelight, a good limelight. It's going to be some forces that's going to be met with some challenges. Because when you start ripping up people's votes, this is worse than a hanging Chad. We all were young enough, Casey. Remember? Is it Chad? Let me find a piece of paper. Is it slightly bent? Remember, Casey? Is it slightly bent? Right? And y'all remember what happened in Florida? The voters didn't decide who won that race. It was the Supreme Court. And anything goes to the Supreme Court, Casey, it's not going to be good for us. And that's why I'm so concerned. So yes, in response to your question, I am very concerned. And I'm doing my part individually as well as collectively to make sure that we have poll workers, that we have law enforcement, that we have lawyers at every precinct, that we have lawyers. And so we partner with the NAACP, we partner with the ACLU, we partner with a lot of organizations, nonprofit organizations, so they too can be monitoring all of these precincts along with us. And so because we realize, Casey, we will have a fight on our hand, and prayerfully it won't be a physical fight, right? But a fight nonetheless. And that's our prayers. But I am concerned. I'm concerned. As a retired naval officer, I'm concerned. But I'm optimistic though, Casey. I remain optimistic that we will overcome, because this is not the first time the United States was threatened with an inside force.
Well, thank you so much for doing what you're doing and for talking to us.
Thank you, Representative Jackson. Before we move to call to action from Representative Jackson, I just have one question, because I'm just miles down the road from you over here in Fairburn. And there are other couple of Georgians on the line as well, so they're just as concerned. I understand that the judge had a bench trial last week about these laws that they're trying to enforce. And he did overturn the abortion ban, but whatever came with the counting by hand. It's just, I mean, we got 159 counties, and Fulton County is large, Clayton County is large. DeKalb and Gwinnett. Those are large counties, Fulton County and Gwinnett, large populations of colored people, large Democratic base. What have they do? I have not heard anything about what they decide about Han County, because they even the Raffensperger said it's illegal. The Attorney General said it's illegal. So what are
Great
they?
questions. No, that's a great question, Suzanne. And for those who don't know, our Superior Court judge, the one that overturned this abortion ban, is the same judge is now hearing a case about voting by hand. And so we expect Suzanne to hear his order, I want to say as early as tomorrow, Monday.
Okay.
And we're praying that on the final day to register to vote here in Georgia, that he's going to come out and say, no, we're not doing that. And you got to stop with all these rules during this. Again, this is supposed to be a quiet period, 90 days. And it's well documented for the federal law and the state. 90 days should be the quiet period. So we can hear something as early as tomorrow, Suzanne, that this Superior Court judge saying that this state election board, they're out of their lane. They are appointed, not elected. They are appointed officials, and the state election board, that governing body, has one function, and that is to certify the vote by all 159 counties.
Yeah.
So that's our prayers, and we can hear something as early as tomorrow.
Okay, great. And we also had one victory when a judge told the GOP down here, I want to say Friday, they were trying to say there was something wrong with the voting machines and trying to mess with that angle, the GOP, and the judge said, oh, no, we're going to leave the machines alone. So we are having a small victory down here. Well, Representative.
Yeah, we just spent $140 million on these machines 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Right.
So, Representative Jackson, what is your call to action? I'm sorry.
Could I ask a question before?
Yes. Yes.
We're very close to time. I not necessarily a question, but I just want to really applaud you, because a lot what you said resonates with me too. It took me back to my childhood when you were shoveling the snow. Even though I'm from Texas, we didn't shovel the snow, but my mother always taught us, and this is her philosophy, and I live with it: if you see someone who needs help, help them. If you see something that needs to be done, do it. I tell that story so much, it probably sounds like a broken record to the people that are on this call, but I think everything that we do initially in society to help people, it goes back to family. And it doesn't happen when you're just a grown-up. It happens how you were trained as a child, and you carried with you. Because what I'm hearing you say, everything you've said today, it took me right back to that house in New York, and you shoveling the snow with your mother's demand, I guess, or command or whatever. And the thing of it is, you don't take pay for it. I think that's part of what you were talking about in the courageous community. We don't expect anything. It's not reciprocal. You just do it because you see someone who needs that help. And I think that's the way it has to be in this political dilemma that we find ourselves in. Georgia needs help. Like Casey was saying, let's get on the phone and call people in Georgia. We don't even have to wait. Go on to Mobilize, find an action that you can call into Georgia and help people there. Because what you were saying is people are becoming very disgruntled. I do phone banking almost every single day. And I talked to a lady, not in Georgia. It's contagious statewide. The negative, my vote doesn't count. I tried my best to convince her that your vote is important. I told her my story. Our stories are powerful. It didn't work. It didn't work. People are just, because of all the rhetoric, all the lies, but we cannot stop there. We have to find a way to break through that noise and really share our stories about democracy as we know it, as we've experienced it. It might even get down to the point where they say how old we are. I don't like doing that, but it might be that I have to say, I'm not a strange chick. But I've been through that before, and I understand what you're talking about, but your vote does count. So I appreciate you sharing that part of your life. I hear all the other information, but it's family that resonates with me. And family for me growing up wasn't my blood kin all the time. It was people in the community who needed help. And so we have to be a community of a nation that's reaching out to help people in Georgia, wherever it is. So I really appreciate you being here. and just sharing from your heart. So genuine. I just felt like, oh my gosh, let me just put my elbow up here and just listen. It was powerful. And I really appreciate everything you're doing. Thank you for your service in the military and the service that you're extending to us now as Americans. We all are going to benefit we are benefiting from who you are as a person. So continue doing what you're doing. You're very, very inspiring, motivating, and we needed this today. So your preaching was just fine.
Well, thank you again, Miss Evelyn. It was great to be with you all. Listen, I would say this in terms of my clarion call to you all, individually and collectively. We witnessed something powerful that happened organically beginning July 21st. And when you think about what happened, President Biden exercised political courage on July 21st. For someone who ran for president 3 times, finally became president, very successful last 4 years, right? He took us out of the brink of COVID, right? And when you think about it, that was just 4 years ago. That was just 4 years ago, Casey. That was just 4 years ago, where over 1 million Americans died. And then he became president. And now he says, I'm going to turn this thing over to my vice president. And even President Biden knew, Flaxen, that nobody wanted his vice president. Nobody. Members in the Democratic Party were saying, no, let's get someone else. And they had all these men names, Casey, all these men names, Lena. And President Biden said, no. If y'all want me to step down, okay, I will. And 20 minutes after he stepped down, he exercised political courage. Flaxen. What he did was he said, I'm going to endorse my vice president, the same person that I asked to run with me. And what we discovered, Miss Evelyn, that political courage can be exercised individually, but then we watched something collectively. July 21st, Suzanne, we watched 48,000, I forget the number now. It's a big number, like 48,000 Black women. Then the next day it was 53,000 Black men. Then the white women said, no, we ain't gonna be left behind. 200,000 white women. Then the comedian, and then the Hispanics, then the janitors, then it was all these different groups for Harris. Nobody wanted to be left behind because we realized we all play a role individually and collectively. And so my clarion call to you all, ARC, family and friends, is first, find out what you can do individually, Flaxen, Lena, Suzanne, Victoria, Ms. Evelyn, Casey. Find out what we can do individually, right? For me, so far, we're 2,000 miles and going because we got more work until these next 30 days, right? But then we got to find out collectively, Ms. Evelyn. I think collectively, ARC is a great vehicle. If ARC 5-10 years from now will be recognized like ACLU and NAACP. You're going to look back and say, we were birthed in 2020 out of a cause, but that cause now manifests into what it is today. Is to bring a community, regardless if you live in Colorado, Oregon, New York, Texas, it doesn't matter. You're going to champion a cause. You're going to champion a cause to fight against racism. You're going to champion a cause to fight against misogyny. You're going to champion a cause, right? That embraces how to celebrate, how to educate, and how to cultivate, right? Where ARC becomes a household name in California, in New York, in Florida, in Texas, in Alabama, in Georgia, right? Become that force because you realize how to organize and mobilize, right? You got friends like Suzanne right here in Georgia. And so when we start to connect all these dots, Casey, doesn't matter if you live in Colorado or Oregon, Flaxen, you're going to realize that we've been blessed with a technology where you meet once a month and figure out what's the next hurdle. Because after November 5th, Miss Evelyn, after November 5th, it's not like a relay race. It doesn't end on November 5th. We're going to have to, because next year you're going to have some senators and governors running for it, right? And so you're always, every year, you're going to have some elections. Every year, this democracy is so dynamic. And so my clarion call is to find out what you can do individually. And then second, find out what you can do collectively to make this world a better place to where we feel that we can live heaven on earth. Because our grandchildren one day want to ask the question, Miss Evelyn, what did you do in 2024 and 25 and 26? So that way the future can embrace a democracy and take it to the next level. And so I appreciate you all. I love you all. And if there's anything you can do to that I can do to help you, help me, help you, I'm always a phone call away, right? And I do not put that out there just, willy-nilly. I mean what I say and I say what I mean because my mother looks down on heaven and say, my only son is doing the work that I taught him when he was 7 or 8 years old of age. And so until I see her in heaven, that I want to make sure when I do see her, she'll say, job well done. Because what I taught you when you were 7 or 8, you continue to do that until your last breath. And so if there's nothing else that you all will learn about me, I will rest when he calls me home.